Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. How y'all doing? Happy Monday. Let's get into this. As we know, we do a pre-show here. We have clips from what has happened this morning in the House of Commons, the committee meetings, anything interesting to keep us going. And we do have a lot of interesting pieces. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see everyone. Hope people had a good weekend. It's getting cold. I know it's below freezing every morning here. Let's kick this off. Again, good to see everybody here. Like, share, subscribe. It does help if you hit the subscribe. Let's get some people in the room. Join in the chat. We've got a great gang that we watched the question period with, the pre-show. So let's get going here. In Canadian federal politics, the Canucks are represented by two separate yet unequal groups. The globalists who sold out and the opposition trying to salvage a country. These are their stories.
We're going to start with Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett.
At Brookfield, when Brookfield's value increases, the value of stock options and deferred share units also increase. That's how these instruments work, correct?
Yes, when our share price increases, the value of those instruments do increase, yes.
And that basic reality doesn't change simply because those instruments would be placed in a blind trust. The value would still rise when the value of Brookfield rises, correct?
Yes.
So if someone holds Brookfield options and units in a blind trust or not, they personally benefit when Brookfield performs well. Isn't that right?
Anybody who holds those instruments, whether during employment or following employment, derives the benefit from those instruments. That's correct.
And any instrument can be sold, bought back, cash settled, or unwound in an instance where, for example, if Parliament required by law divestment by sale, that possibility exists, correct?
The Prime Minister would have certain instruments as part of our long-term incentive plans. There are certain instruments that are less liquid than others. I'm happy to get into the details of that if you wish.
I would, but the premise is what I need to settle is that they can be sold, bought back, or cash settled or unwound. It is possible. Should it be a requirement? Is that correct?
Yes, it's possible.
Thank you. Long dated, they're long dated, so we get that. But that's generally how compensation contracts work. That's not some kind of unique, that's not something unique to Mr. Carney, since you brought him up.
Well, long term, yes. In some cases, exercisable in shorter horizons. In some cases, the ultimate value is received far into the future.
Can you explain briefly how stock options or deferred share units and notional long-term incentive plans work at Brookfield? What drives their value?
Yes, I'd be happy to, and I will try to be brief. Helpfully, all disclosure relating to Brookfield stock options and deferred share units is disclosed in detail in our public filings, so it's very much available. In a nutshell, stock options are rights to acquire shares of Brookfield at a certain price, and those exist and during their pendency are exercisable, subject to vesting. Because when we award them, people take subject to vesting schedules. So even though you awarded them, they have to vest during the time that you were with Brookfield, and then exercisable for stock that can then be sold into the market. Deferred share units are slightly different. They also track the value of a Brookfield share, but they are not actually shares. And when they mature, they are paid out to the individual based on the value of the share at that time. They are the second component to some of our LTIP programs.
Are you able to give us approximate value range of options and deferred share units that Mr. Carney still holds?
As I said in my response letter, that's personal and private information, and that's not something that Brookfield is permitted to disclose to the committee.
Well, what I will say is that you enjoy parliamentary privilege while you're at this table, and this committee is not constrained in its ability to request information or documents. But I'll move on for the moment.
Okay.
Increases in Brookfield's performance increases the value of the instruments that Mark Carney still holds. So he makes more when Brookfield does better. Yes?
In relation to the stock options and deferred share units, yes, as the value of Brookfield increases, the value of those instruments increase. There are also carried interest entitlements that relate more specifically to funds that we manage.
So speaking of funds, the Global Transition Fund is one that Mr. Carney was directly involved in. Are you able to provide us with details of the investments that are inside it that drive the value of his position or those who hold a position in it?
Yes, so I believe you're referring to Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1, which was launched during the time that the Prime Minister was with Brookfield. And I can confirm that all of the investments made in that fund are contained in the annexure to the Commissioner's screen document that has been published.
Okay. We're going to have to come back to some of this, but my last question is, with the Prime Minister still holding compensation that rises with Brookfield's performance, how would you say that Canadians would be able to have confidence that blind trust and private screen are enough to protect the public interest when, as you agreed, when Brookfield does better, the Prime Minister is going to do better?
And that's a very fair question.
I need a quick response, and if you can you...
Well, I think it's based on whether or not the conflicts can be managed. I'm happy to talk about that further.
Thank you, sir. Madame Lapointe, first round. We're going to go to the second round. Mr. Cooper for 5 minutes, 300 seconds. Just also want you to be mindful of the interpreters as well, please. So ask the question, response, ask the question, just to make sure that the interpreters everything's in sync here. So, okay, thank you. Go ahead, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bieber. I want to ask you some questions about carried interest payments that you alluded to earlier. Mr. Carney's ethics disclosure indicates that he is entitled to carried interest payments, which are essentially future bonus pay from the Brookfield Transition Fund 1, which he helped set up. Mr. Carney also co-chaired the Brookfield Transition Fund 2 as well as the Catalytic Transition Fund. Is Mr. Carney entitled to carried interest payments in respect of those funds?
No, he's not. And the reason for that is we were in the process of setting up those funds when Mr. Carney decided to leave Brookfield to pursue the Liberal leadership. And we had not yet instituted any allocation of carry from those funds. Those funds had not yet been raised. When we talk about launching a fund, we're starting the marketing of that fund, and they had not yet reached a conclusion, even an initial closing of those funds, and therefore we hadn't allocated any carry. Had he stayed with Brookfield, he certainly would have been entitled to some.
Thank you for that. And of course, he is entitled to carried interest payments in respect of the first fund, Brookfield Transition Fund 1. I just want to confirm that that fund is registered in Bermuda.
Registered in Bermuda? Yes, I believe that one is.
And the Brookfield Transition Fund 2 is also registered in Bermuda?
I don't have that information at hand.
Well, I would note a March 26, 2025 CBC News report that indicates that the Ontario Business Registry indicates that the governing jurisdiction for the Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1 and the Brookfield Global Transition Fund 2 is Bermuda. I presume you're not disputing that.
I won't dispute that.
And and I would also just ask that the Catalytic Transition Fund you'll confirm is registered in the Cayman Islands.
I can take that away and make sure that I'm not misspeaking on which jurisdiction it's part of.
I think you know the answer to that. It's yes. So I want to ask you a little bit about the schedule of payments with respect to carried interest from the Brookfield Transition Fund 1. When does the fund mature?
Transition Fund 1 would have a maturity of 10 years plus a 2-year possible extension, which would take it to 2032 to 34, I believe.
2032 or 2034. So it would be at that time that the carried interest payments would be paid out.
Towards that. And I would say that regardless of where the fund is actually established, everything that I mentioned in relation to Madame Lapointe's question hold for everything in that fund.
Now, just in terms of what is in that fund, there are new investments in that fund, correct?
There are investments in that fund. They're not necessarily new.
But if there were new investments in that fund, that would increase the value of carried interest payments, would that potentially?
If additional capital were invested in that fund, it could, if they're good investments.
Okay. Now, Brookfield CEO Bruce Flatt was quoted in a National Post article dated March 15th, 2025, in which he described carried interest payments in the following way, quote, "Put simply, carried interest is our share of the profits realized on an entire fund subject to that fund exceeding a minimum target return for clients. If we meet fund expectations, we get 20% of the profits," close quote. So you would agree that that's an accurate characterization of how carried interest in respect to the fund works?
I think that's a fair summary. Subject to that, the subject to is a very significant part of how carried interest works.
Right. So Brookfield ideally would get 20% of the profits if the threshold had been met or exceeded. Now, in terms of carried interest payments to the managing partners, what is the range? What is the percent of that 20%?
Well, it completely ranges by fund. And
I'm asking with respect to the Brookfield Transition Fund 1.
Need a quick response, Mr. Bieber, please.
It's a proportion of the total that Brookfield is
I'm
entitled
asking
to.
what is that portion?
Okay. May have to come back to that, Mr. Cooper. Okay, thank you. Ms. Church, for 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome,
Church
Mr.
is
Bieber.
awful.
Mr. Bieber, just picking up on a few points that were raised by my colleagues across the table. You were kind of cut off in your answer talking about the move of Brookfield Asset Management. Can you elaborate on what you were going to say in terms of the actual implications of that transfer of structure?
Yes, thank you. So I was in the process of explaining that nothing, in fact, moved in relation to the designation of New York as our principal office for purposes of the asset management business. That asset management business was launched close to 30 years ago, and we grew it within Brookfield Corporation for close to 25 years. As that, we launched it in Canada, but it, as I think the committee is well aware, has become a global alternative asset manager. The scale of that has been driven in large part by the clients that we have and the jurisdictions in which we've had those opportunities. The United States, being one of the principal capitals of the world in investment flows, drew a lot of our business into the U.S. organically as the business evolved. When we decided to launch Brookfield Asset Management as its own separate publicly traded company, at the same time, the S&P, which regulates what companies are in or out of various indices, changed its rules and made it easier for Canadian companies like us to possibly qualify for inclusion in U.S. indices. And we were already in possession of a company. We were already a company at Brookfield Asset Management with significant girth and presence in the United States. And we designated our New York office, which already existed, as that principal office, which is perhaps something we should have done beforehand, but certainly the change in rules made that beneficial to us. Nothing moved. We changed the designation of our principal office. No people moved, no assets moved, no investments changed.
Thank you for that. And let me maybe just ask you, because that's a great way to segue into, just talk to me a little bit about Brookfield's headquarters. You're headquartered in Canada. You're headquartered in Toronto, correct?
Brookfield Corporation is, yes.
Yes. You're one of Canada's largest employers
We
and
are.
companies.
We are.
How many employees do you have as a company?
Across Brookfield and our portfolio companies, over 15,000.
15,000. And how much federal tax do you pay in Canada? You mentioned it in your open remarks.
$750 million last year.
So would you say that you are proudly Canadian?
We are proudly Canadian.
Let me ask you about another topic that my colleagues opposite have raised around conflicts of interest. Presumably you have to deal with conflicts of interest in a corporate context.
Sometimes.
What are some of the tools that you use to manage conflicts inside Brookfield?
I appreciate that question. Conflicts do arise from time to time. And our view is that there are certain principles that must be applied when they do arise. And the first is transparency. We have systems in place to ensure that when conflicts arise, they're identified. Once a conflict is identified, there are really only two ways to resolve a conflict. One is to avoid it altogether, to terminate it in some fashion, and the other is to have it consented to or approved by an unconflicted decision maker. And we have significant processes and procedures in place to ensure that once they're identified, they are resolved through one of those two means.
Do you use blind trust, or are you familiar with the blind trust in the sense that we would use it here in the federal context?
I'm now, after having been invited here, I am loosely familiar with those.
So you would appreciate in the federal context that a public office holder who comes under the Act, when they establish a blind trust, they are considered to have divested their controlled assets.
Yes.
So they're not allowed to give direction to a trustee on that front. So no knowledge if the assets are held, if they're sold, if they're converted. So, I mean, my colleague, Mr. Barrett, earlier suggested that if shares are held, that the holder benefits. But there's a big assumption built into that once the assets are in the trust, the public office holder has no knowledge what those assets are. Would you agree with that?
You're over time. I need a quick response, please.
I would. I apologize. I'm not sure what.
Maybe we can come back to it then, because we're 25 seconds over.
Sorry.
Monsieur Thériault, je vais donner.
Just to follow up on a few points, has Brookfield Global ever been criminally charged with anything like bribery, for example?
Charge? No.
Has there ever been an investigation for bribery against Brookfield Global Asset Management?
Nothing that has not been found to be completely false.
But were there charges?
No, there were no charges.
There was no investigation into bribery in Brazil?
There was, again, that was found to be completely false. And in fact, the person who was alleging is now in jail.
Okay. Is Brookfield registering investment funds to a bike shop in Bermuda good for Canada, and what impact does that have on the payment of taxes in Canada?
Look, as I've said before, our first and foremost, we have businesses that do have presence in Bermuda, and those are part of an overall investment structure that allows investors to pool their capital in jurisdictions where we can achieve tax transparency so that businesses that we own can pay taxes in the jurisdictions in which those businesses operate, And then those after-tax proceeds can be delivered to investors in the jurisdictions where they are based and pay taxes there as well.
The answer is that it's good for Canada to register funds to a bike shop in Bermuda.
I'm not passing judgment on what's good or not.
Okay.
I'm saying what these rules are implemented to achieve.
Are you able to provide us with a list of investments in the catalytic funds and the global transition funds 1 and 2? Is that something you're able to furnish the committee with?
The committee has the list of the investments in Global Transition 1. Global Transition 2 and catalytic are irrelevant.
Are you able to provide us with a list of the investments in the 3 funds that I've mentioned?
I'd have to go back and check.
Check if you have them, or check if you'll do it?
I'll take it under advisement.
Well, I'd like the list. I'd like the list of the investments in the funds. How was the long-term performance pay structured when Mr. Carney was at Brookfield? Are you able to tell us what metrics determined that pay?
While he was an employee of Brookfield?
We can do that now. I can suspend the meeting for a couple of minutes if you need a break. You're good to go? Okay, so we're going to continue our second hour with Mr. Cooper for 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Bieber, I want to follow up on carried interest payments. I asked you about the proportion that those entitled to them would receive. You said there would be a range. I presume that the payment would be consistent with industry standards. Would that be fair? It would be in line with industry standards?
Yes, that's fair.
And I would note that a managing partner would generally be entitled, as I understand it, to about 3%. That is the industry standard. And I would note that the Brookfield Transition Fund 1 is a $15 billion fund. If Brookfield gets 20% of the profits, then 3% of that 20%, which is what could apply or would be in line with what Mr. Carney would stand to gain. He would stand to make tens of millions of dollars in future bonus pay from the Brookfield Transition Fund 1. Now,
I don't think that that's the right. You're not using the right math, because what is industry standard would be very much based on how large the fund is.
Are you disputing that Mr. Carney stands to make millions, if not tens of millions of dollars?
Look, our investments may be very, very, very successful.
Yeah, so you're not
so
disputing that.
I'm not saying one way or the other.
You're not disputing that. Now,
It's certainly not a fact.
Thank you. So with respect to SEC filings, there are 141 investors in the Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1. You indicated that this committee has
Sorry, where do you get that information from?
SEC filings,
Okay.
and you that is the number that I have. If
Okay.
that number is not accurate, you can state the correct number.
I don't have that detailed information at hand.
But you indicated that, you seem to have some detailed information, because you told the committee moments ago that we have a list of all of the LPs, a list of all the investors.
Because I reviewed the annexure to the document that the Ethics Commissioner released publicly.
Well, what we have in the annexure is the reference to Mr. Carney's interest in that fund,
Yes.
reference to the fact that he is entitled to carried interest payments.
Yes.
What we don't have is a breakdown of what the LPs are in the fund. We don't have that.
Identity of the LPs?
We don't have that.
Okay.
So would you undertake to provide this committee with an identity of the LPs?
We don't disclose the identity of the LPs in every single fund that we have. I don't think that there's any reason to do so here.
Well, I think there is a reason to do so here, insofar as Mr. Carney stands to make millions, if not tens of millions of dollars from future bonus pay based upon the performance of that fund. Mr. Carney knows which public policy decisions might impact upon the fund's success, which in turn impacts his future bonus pay. These represent conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest. And at the present time, they're hidden conflicts of interest because Mr. Carney hasn't revealed what those holdings are, even though he helped set up the fund.
I misunderstood your question. You're asking me, what has the fund invested in?
I want to know what has the fund invested in, what the LPs are, what the holdings are. I want to know what's in the fund.
Okay, we're just confusing terminology. What I've told you is that in the annexure, the fund's holdings, each of the companies that BGTF1 holds is in the annexure.
Yeah, it's not.
Each company. And there's only one, by the way, that is in Canada. It's a company called Entropy. Entropy is held by BGTF1.
The holdings in the fund are not in the annex. So I'm just asking you to provide us a list of those holdings.
Sorry, let me be more clear. BGTF1 has invested in 20 businesses, roughly. And each of those businesses, their names, are listed in the annexure.
Who are the LPs?
Again, we don't disclose the identity of our LPs. And the identity of the LPs has nothing to do with the value that the fund will undertake. We manage the fund, we make the investment decisions, and those investment decisions have been made. We own those companies in that fund. If those companies do well and we do well in stewarding them and driving value through them, then BGTF1 will do well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Bieber, the requests that are coming from some members of the committee are being documented by the clerk, and they will be forwarded to you as a request. We're keeping track. Thank you. Come on.
All right, gang, we're going to slip over now to a different committee meeting. We're going to the finance investigation or the finance hearing. The budget officers there, the big watchdog. Let's check this out. We've got a few rounds here that are pretty interesting. Let's go. Let's keep it going.
We will begin now with 6 minutes for Mr. Halan.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Jakes, thanks for being here, and to your team for being so readily available for this committee. Mr. Jakes, you outlined in your report about Budget 2025 that $100 billion was misidentified under so-called investment, and that should have been operational expense. Why did you reclassify that $100 billion in your report?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit how we treated capital investment in our issues note. Essentially, we compared the approach of the government, that is a bit broader, that includes a greater type of measures, with an approach that more closely follows other jurisdiction and international standards, that strictly focuses on transaction that directly increase the capital stock, and like I said, follows definitions from international organization, from the System of National Accounts, from the United Nations. So that kind of extra amount of money would correspond to categories that the government has added to the definition, which can include, tax measures, production subsidy, and others.
Thank you. Now, given that you've reclassified that $100 billion, what does that do to the fiscal anchor of the operational budget that they're saying that they're going to supposedly balance in 3 years?
Well, I think that the one thing we highlighted in a report is that it would make it harder to balance the operating budget if the definition of capital was stricter.
Right. Now, for the people that are watching today, what does that say to the Canadians? What does that all the stuff that we're talking about right now, not meeting a fiscal anchor or risking it, what does that do to a Canadian's bottom line?
Thanks for the question. I think the bottom line, as we would see it, is it does come back to one of transparency. So whether it's the definition of capital, where the government has come up with a made in Ottawa definition of capital that bears some resemblance to what we've seen in the UK and other jurisdictions, but as we point out, is much broader, or the government is changing, making very substantial changes to fiscal anchors within a relatively short period of time. It really, Parliament and I think Canadians would potentially benefit from a more open and clearer discussion around it.
I fully agree with you. I think that, Mr. Jakes, you brought up the word transparency a lot. Whether it's, as you said in your opening statement, that the government within 6 weeks changed its fiscal anchors and the broad definition of capital. I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you would like to see that you're not seeing today under this government when it comes to transparency, and what does that say to credibility of this government?
Well, I think, excuse me, we offer one recommendation in the report, and specifically with respect to the definition of capital, that given that the government is now planning on using the operating budget or a balanced operating budget as one of the fiscal anchors, and the linkage between the operating budget and the capital definition, given that they're intrinsically linked, that the government, somebody else should be defining the definition of what capital actually looks like. I think the comparison that I've used in other situations is you need to have a separation of responsibility.
Il faut avoir une séparation des responsabilités. Donc, pour mon fils de 17 ans, ce n'est pas quelqu'un qui arrive avec ses devoirs. Il exécute ses devoirs, il fait ses devoirs. Et quelqu'un, après, va mettre une note. Et certainement, quand il est question de la cible capitale, Monsieur Jakes, on a un problème avec l'interprétation.
This channel switched. Have we fixed it? Can we try it again? Can you carry on?
Sure.
Has it corrected itself?
Certainly from our perspective, looking at the previous fiscal anchors, the Government of Canada or the Department of Finance doesn't define debt. That's defined by the Public Sector Accounting Board. It doesn't define GDP. That's something defined by Statistics Canada. And now we moved into territory where the Department of Finance defines what capital is. And they come up with the capital budget, and then they will assess that after the fact and potentially make changes to what the definition of capital is as they see fit. And that's something that we recommend should be changed, consistent with what we see in the UK, where while the UK might have a capital definition, it's set by somebody else, and the assessment is also done by somebody else after the fact. It's simply good practice.
I agree. I think I really appreciate that you highlighted this transparency piece altogether. But I'd like to know from you, what does that do to our credibility when obviously if you're pointing out there's not much transparency, what does it do to Canada's credibility, or how would Canadians take a look at that when it comes to seeing like there's no transparency in the fiscal anchors, as you've highlighted before, or the fact that they've abandoned their debt to GDP ratio?
Well, I would say that by virtue of this committee meeting here today, for parliamentarians to be spending 2 hours on this issue and discussing and debating this issue, I think it certainly speaks to the credibility and confidence that Canadians can have that parliamentarians are paying attention to the issue. From our perspective, there are issues that we've raised that we think are pertinent to parliamentarians that potentially they might want to make changes to them. So, for instance, in the case of the UK and Australia, after an election, a government is legislatively required to actually identify in crystal clear language what the new fiscal anchors are and how they're going to be measured. So that's something that potentially parliamentarians might want to discuss and might see to be worthwhile.
Thank you, Mr. Jenks, and thank you, Mr. Hallan. That concludes the time for this. Please.
Mr. Jacques, in your report, you call for an independent expert body to review or opine on what the government is including in the definition of capital investments. It is surprising, it is shocking that we need an independent body to sort of police the numbers. Can you explain why you felt that we needed this independent expert body?
It goes back to the fundamental principle of separation of responsibilities, which is an accounting concept. And fundamentally, you want to ensure that the people coming up with the budget and then evaluating whether they met the target, that those individuals don't have control over the definitions. So at the midpoint, they can't change the definitions of what falls into those categories.
But apart from a good practice, if the definitions had not been changed and made so broadly and the presentation of the budget had been changed, we wouldn't necessarily be calling for an independent expert body. This is as a result of the changes, of the layers of difficulty that we have in actually understanding what counts as an operating expense and what counts as a capital expense. Is that fair to say?
I would say that is fair, and if this was not related to the government's new fiscal anchor of balancing the operating budget, it would be interesting that the Government of Canada came up and is now defining capital differently than the Accounting Board and Statistics Canada and the United Nations. But it's something that the government could do. They can come up with any language they want to and define things as they see fit. That's their discretion. The moment it entered into the territory of this is our new fiscal anchor and this is how Canadians can judge our performance and this is how we're going to be communicating with parliamentarians, it turned it into an issue, or it turned it into something that certainly requires greater transparency and better controls, so parliamentarians can understand it, know what they're looking at, and deliberate over it.
Yeah, I mean, when I read through the budget, I did find that it was very vague. It was not clear what was included as a capital investment and what was excluded from it. I think that the government was intentional in the vagueness, and as a finance professional, I felt that was surprising because it's such an important term, and you would expect it to be actually clearly laid out. So would you say that having an independent expert who determines what counts as capital investments will allow parliamentarians to make more informed decisions when it comes to reporting and scrutinizing the government's expenses?
The short answer is yes, and the longer answer, which you probably don't want, is looking at how changes actually happen to Public Service Accounting Board standards. There is a draft discussion paper that's published months, if not years in advance. It's circulated for comments. Those comments are then collated by the Accounting Standards Board. Then there's a revised draft that is issued for potentially further consultation if there isn't tight consensus. And ultimately, the new standard is implemented with a bit of lead time so everyone can react to it. Certainly in this situation, that's something that could be a good practice, and especially were there to be a change in government or change in Minister of Finance, certainly having transparency around how that Minister of Finance defines capital, it would certainly be something that would be potentially challenging for parliamentarians if there were there to be a new Minister of Finance and the definition was changing without consultation or any of the information being published.
When I speak to my constituents, a lot of them are saying, well, we just want accountability, and they actually welcome this recommendation of an independent expert body so that there is, they feel that the numbers are a little bit more reliable. You sort of take politics out of the numbers. So it was actually welcome based on your report. Have you received any confirmation or assurances from the Prime Minister or the Minister of Finance that they will be adopting this recommendation of an independent expert body?
No.
Thank you. Would you say that this expanded definition of capital investments present the government's fiscal position in a better situation than it actually is?
I would say that it's additional and new information. All of the old information is still there. So debt levels, debt to GDP, deficit to GDP, all those data still exist. The observation that
Thank you, Mr. Jakes. We're going to have to end this round there. Thank you, Ms. Cobine. Mr. Kelly for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. I'd like to continue on the topic of credibility. You mentioned in your opening statement that it was only 6 weeks ago that the Prime Minister was insisting that the that his government's fiscal anchor was a declining debt to GDP ratio, and now it is a declining deficit to GDP ratio, wherein they then change the definition of an operating deficit and claim that that is a new fiscal anchor. Can you talk about how changing the goalposts, cutting loose fiscal anchors, and these kinds of inconsistencies affect Canada's fiscal credibility?
Thanks for the question. I would say again it comes back to an issue of the government has full discretion to establish whatever fiscal management practices it wants to, including identifying or potentially changing the fiscal anchors as it sees fit. From our perspective, and looking at good practices across among advanced economies, if you're going to do so, you should do it in a transparent way that brings everyone along with you. So if there are fundamental changes that the government has planned with respect to fiscal management, a good practice would be to explain, these are the changes we're proposing. Does anyone have any feedback? Does everyone understand what these are and what the consequences might be? And then after receiving feedback, potentially putting those into place, incorporating the feedback as you see fit. And that's something that, again, we flag for parliamentarians.
So when an existing fiscal anchor like a declining debt to GDP ratio is so quickly abandoned, how much credibility does the new fiscal anchor have?
I don't know that I'm in a good position to judge that using numbers.
Well, okay. Now, with numbers, you did note in your report that there is only, in your estimation, only a 7.5% chance that the government will maintain the anchor that it is now assigned itself. So, talk about that, how you arrived at that conclusion, and how that impacts the credibility of the government.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So in terms of measuring the probability of the government respecting its declining deficit to GDP anchor, that's based upon, it's actually using an IMF framework and looking at the historical shocks that have faced the Canadian economy going back over the past 30 years. And when we face those shocks, how severe are they, and in that context, is the government going to be able to still respect those anchors? And again, it's not to say that they can't, and going back to the question around fiscal sustainability, it's not to say that the government is not fiscally sustainable. It is to say that there's a lot less room than there used to be. And the next time there's an economic shock, and there will be, and economic shocks mean recessions, economic shocks can mean pandemics, economic shocks can mean the terrorist attacks of 2001. When those shocks happen, there's far less space, fiscal space, than we had previously.
Right, so they are setting themselves up to have less room to deal with events which we know will happen in the years ahead.
That's correct.
Right. So if a fiscal anchor has only a 7.5% chance of being maintained, is there any purpose in stating an anchor?
I think that's a better question for the Minister of Finance rather than myself.
Right. So there's a 92. Your assessment is there's a 92.5% chance that this government will not maintain this anchor.
That's correct.
Right. So that would, I think, leave one to conclude that there's really not much point, especially since they just got cut loose their last anchor when it seemed unlikely that, in fact, even their own budget says they will not meet their last anchor. Maybe last question then. So when the finance department decided on its own to change the definition in order to then give itself this new anchor with almost no chance of being maintained, they were actually violating the accounting principle of separation of responsibility?
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. We're going to have to end it there. We'll continue.
Your question. Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, when Canadians saw the budget that was presented,
We're just going to check out Melissa Lantsman from earlier on the House of Commons floor. She's a great speaker. Don't know if you all know. Well, I think most of you do know who Melissa Lantsman is. She's a star to me. She's a great speaker.
in Canada, I think they could use two words to describe it, and it's sticker shock. And it is sticker shock about the number which was presented as the deficit, the $78 billion. This was, of course, $16 billion more than the Prime Minister promised during the campaign. It is double what the last Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, had spent, and he had spent more than all Prime Ministers combined, and it is the most that this country has ever spent outside of the pandemic years. Let's go through some more numbers. There's over $90 billion of new spending, and the Liberals have called these generational investments, but they are in fact generational debt. And I'll talk a little bit about what this budget means for those who will have to pay for it later. But some more numbers, and what I mean by generational debt is that the Liberal government will add more than $320 billion of federal debt over the next 5 years, over the cycle of the budget. And again, that's more than Justin Trudeau was going to add, because he was at about $154 billion. The budget adds, I should say, $10 million of debt every hour. And why that matters, of course, is because, like any other debt that Canadians would incur, they pay interest on that debt. We're going to pay $55 billion just to service that debt every single year. And what that means is that isn't money that's going to doctors or hospitals or nurses, but it is in fact more than the government transfers to the provinces in healthcare. It is also the amount that the government collects in sales tax, in GST. So that means that every dollar collected in the sales tax by the federal government, again, is not going to go to doctors or hospitals or nurses, but it is going to go to bankers to service that debt. The weak economic performance in this budget is also something that should alarm Canadians, more than just the sticker shock. It's got real GDP growth in 2025 at 1.1%. That's the second lowest in the G7. Unemployment averaging 6.4% over the coming years, and an industrial carbon tax that remains in place and will actually get higher. These should all be concerning, but what is most concerning about this budget is that it tells a story of two different Canadas. It tells the story well, it creates effectively two different Canadas. Those who work for wages, who see nothing at all in terms of relief in this budget, and those who invest for income. And you've really targeted those two as very different. The problem is that the first group, those who go to work every single day, who collect a paycheck, well, they don't see anything in this budget. And it is concerning. This country has an overwhelming amount of potential. And it seems that at every turn over the last 10 years, that potential has been squandered. We have everything the world wants, and we should be the richest country in the world. But we've got a government that's spending away our future on a credit card with very little to show for it. We've got a federal bureaucracy that has grown by 99,000 workers over the last 10 years. And now a government who can't say where those reductions will come from. And by the way, none of your services have ever gotten better. In fact, you wait longer for services. You wait on the phone with CRA only to maybe get somebody, and if you do get somebody, 80% of those answers have found to be incorrect. It takes you longer to get a passport. It takes you longer to reach anybody on the phone. And yet, the public service has grown and the services have gotten worse. And that's what you end up paying for in this budget. But more about the tale of two Canadas. If you draw your income from a portfolio, this budget might have a few things for you. It has some of the good ideas that we had brought forward in the last election campaign, although it doesn't go far enough. We can talk about resource development. This government has been beating its chest about a pipeline announcement that is going to come to the table at some point, whether it's in 6 days or 6 weeks or maybe not even at all. But in the case that it does come, because the Premier of Alberta has talked about it, the news media is all talking about it like there's a done deal. This is a government that invests in more bureaucracy rather than just going ahead and getting out of its own way. You see, in order to build a pipeline in this country, you've got to get rid of things like a shipping ban off of the West Coast, and we would applaud the government if they actually just came out and said what they were going to do. You'd have to get rid of an oil and gas cap in order for anything to be filled in that pipeline to be able to take it somewhere, and eventually to Tidewater, where there is still that shipping ban. You'd have to reduce the industrial carbon tax, or at least make sure that that particular project wasn't didn't have that in the way, just like Canada LNG. All of these things need to happen in order for a pipeline to get built. And all of these things, well, probably will eventually happen while members of the party opposite will drag their feet kicking and screaming. But it is this Prime Minister who sabotaged all of that during his tenure of an advisor to this government. When the Prime Minister canceled the 2016 pipeline, or when he got in the way of it, frankly, being built and put in that shipping ban, it was this Prime Minister who cheered him on from the sidelines. You can read it in his very own book. And when I talk about the budget and squandering the potential, these are the things that we're talking about. This country has the smartest people in the world. We have enough food to feed ourselves and feed the rest of the world, and instead there are 2 million people lined up in a food bank, 4 million people that are going to use a food bank in Canada, and the government wants to be thanked for introducing a food program, because that's their answer always. Their answer is to create more bureaucracy. When they can't get a project built, they announce a project management office that's going to shuffle papers and eventually give an approval for something that has already been approved in the case of one pipeline, if we speak about it. Or if they cause food inflation to soar with their hidden taxes, like an industrial carbon tax that raises the tax on producers, a packaging tax that raises the tax on the buyers and the purchasers of food, or any of the other hidden food taxes, they come in with a big government program to ensure that Canadians will thank them. Well, the 2 million people are still in the food bank line, and food costs here 40% more than it does in the U.S. It's always about centralization. It's always about making sure that you are to thank them for bringing in yet another government program to get rid of the problems that they themselves have caused over the last 10 years. That's the tale of the two Canadas. Those who work for a living, who are constantly trying to get further and further with less and less. An inflationary budget that spends $78 billion is going to ensure that that gets better, and that gets worse and not better. Today we have Canadians, young Canadians, 9 out of 10 who don't believe that they will ever buy a home. And the government's answer to that was to create yet another fourth housing bureaucracy to try to get houses built when the first 3 didn't work. They've dumped $13 billion into yet another government project. I think Canadians who work every single day, who go to work for wages, are wondering what the heck is in this budget for them and where they're going to see some reprieve. We have a lessening standard of living in this country, and the fear that we have is that young people will just get used to this idea. They will get used to the idea that they can't afford a good meal, that they can't afford a home to purchase, that they can't afford a good quality life in what should be the richest country in the world. It wasn't like this 10 years ago, and this budget does nothing to alleviate that pain, to alleviate the pain of those who go to work every single day and who are looking at this government for answers. They have provided none for those people. And that's why the Conservatives cannot and will not support $78 billion of new inflationary spending that will raise taxes and inflation on every single Canadian in every single part of their life.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, suffice to say I disagree virtually with everything that the member opposite has said. When you take a look at the national budget that we brought forward, it's received wide spectrum of support in virtually every region. I even believe Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, wanted to see this particular budget passed. We have a Prime Minister that has been working with provinces, Indigenous leaders, and so many other stakeholders to build a stronger, healthier Canada. Major projects, investing in Canadians, and so forth. Yet all we hear from the Conservative Party is negativity. That's it. My advice to the member opposite and to the Conservative caucus as a whole is that Canada is not broken. Canada is still the very best country in the world to call home. And that is what we continue to work for on the government benches, to build the strongest, healthiest economy in the G7, Mr. Madam Speaker. That is our goal, and we will achieve that goal. And it's more of a comment than an actual question.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Seems like it's always a comment from that member. Madam Speaker, I said in this House that Canada has the utmost potential. The smartest people in the world, the resources that everybody wants, enough food to feed the world, and we are squandering that every single day by higher deficits, higher inflation, higher taxes. We have red tape in the way of building homes and mines and factories and pipelines, and we simply want to see an end to the inflationary deficit, cutting taxes for everyone, a government that actually rewards hard work, and one that will restore affordability for every single Canadian. I know that's not too much to ask, and I know the member opposite understands the value of an opposition to an unchecked Prime Minister.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was interested in hearing my colleagues speak about the impact that this budget will have on taxpayers. I'd like to hear from her about whether it's appropriate that the federal government is using public monies for a pipeline, for example, Trans Mountain. And we see that elsewhere in the budget. We see tens of billions of dollars invested in the oil and gas sector while the government is ignoring the forestry industry. So much money is being invested in the tar sands. Is it appropriate to invest so much public money into this sector?
Member for Thornhill.
Speaker, we wouldn't have to do that if the government just got out of its own way and reduced the impediments to resource development in this country, who approved projects in a way where private sector proponents would want to invest here, to lift the oil and gas cap, to stop the shipping ban, to lower the industrial carbon tax so it makes sense, or actually just, as they are going to do in this project, stop that from even being charged on the project when it is announced. We're going to applaud the government on announcing a pipeline. We're just not sure if everybody on that side agrees.
The Member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge. The Honourable Member for Pitt Meadows.
Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for sharing her thoughts about the economy and the budget. I wonder if she agrees with me, or if she's as perplexed as I am right now, with comments that the Prime Minister has made regarding the fact that he was asked about if he's been in communication with Donald Trump, and he said, who cares? He said there's no burning issue. That given that 75 to 80% of our trade is with the States, that mills are closing down, that in British Columbia, that our automobile sector is losing jobs, and I wonder if the member could comment about his nonchalance.
Member for Thornhill.
I think for all of those watching, the Prime Minister ran an election predicated on the biggest impediment to Canada's growing economy, and that's U.S. trade tariffs. So to hear him say, "I don't care," I want those who are watching at home to know that Conservatives care. The Conservatives care about the job losses in the auto sector from Windsor and Oshawa and everywhere in between. They care about the tariffs that have now tripled on steel and aluminum. They care about the jobs in the forestry sector. There is one party in this House that cares, and that is the Conservative Party. And I want Canadians to know that we're never going to write off the relationship with the U.S. as an I don't care, nonchalant moment. That's not what a leader does. That's not what a leader should do.
Resuming
All right,
debate.
gang, we're going to flip over to question period now. Give me one moment. We'll set that right up. Oh, we've got a joker on the stand or standing on the floor. My goodness. What a weird time in Canada.
$160 million over 5 years to advance women's equality, support the two LGBTI+ Canadians,
Little Wade
and
here is a
expand Canada's
loser.
fight against gender-based violence. To Emma, an openly queer student from Burnaby Central, who wrote me urging that we keep fighting for the most vulnerable who still face discrimination and harassment simply because of who they are. On this side of the House, we hear you, we see you, and we'll defend your rights every single day. Merci.
Here, here.
The honourable member for Battleford, Lloydminster, Meadow Lake.
Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government is the most expensive government in Canadian history. Every dollar this Prime Minister spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians, and they are the ones driving up the cost of everything. Food prices are up 3.4% this year, and they are rising 40% faster here than in the United States. Canadians can't stretch their paychecks any further. Parents are struggling just to put food on the table, and food insecurity has reached truly alarming levels. But when the Liberals had a chance to lower food costs, they refused. Instead, the Prime Minister is pouring fuel on the fire with the deficit of $78 billion. And he is hiking the industrial carbon tax, yet another hidden food tax. These increased input costs make groceries even more expensive for Canadians. It's time to scrap the hidden taxes and make groceries affordable again.
The honourable member for Victoria.
I rise today to acknowledge the passing of one of Canada's great military historians, my stepfather, Donald Edmund Graves. Don served as a military historian with the Government of Canada before later founding his own firm and advising governments, private organizations, and filmmakers in Britain and North America. He was the author or editor of nearly 24 books on many topics, but his greatest passion was the War of 1812. As Canada's leading expert on that conflict that defined our country so early on, Don advised the U.S., Canadian, and British governments on the war's bicentennial celebrations in 2012. From Don, I learned a love of history and strategy, as well as deep respect for the women and men who wear Canada's uniform. I also gained a lifelong appreciation for the importance of good friends, country living, and a family dog. It is fitting that such a great military historian died on Remembrance Day, Mr. Speaker. And today I extend my condolences to Don's son Matthew, his extended family, friends, and colleagues in the military history community. His contributions will be missed, but never forgotten.
The honourable member for Dufferin-Caledon.
It's always a good day to be Brookfield, the Prime Minister's former company under this Liberal government. The latest treat, a $500 million contract for the European Space Agency to create good-paying jobs in Europe. But it gets better. The 50% of the campus, the Harwell campus, where the European Space Agency is located, is owned by Brookfield. And let's not forget, Brookfield is Canada's #1 tax dodger. Through various shell corporations in the Caribbean, they avoided paying $6.5 billion in taxes. Meanwhile, 2.2 million Canadians line up at food banks every single month, and the unemployment rate is 6.9%. This government's answer? Let's make Brookfield richer. Well, I can tell you this. Conservatives will not stop. Every single day we will expose this kind of corruption, and every single day we will fight to make sure it stops.
The honourable member for La Prairie Atakaton. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to pay tribute to two women who have left their mark on municipal life in my riding of La Prairie Atakaton. Elected as city councillor in Sainte Catherine in 1990, Ms. Jocelyne Bates was subsequently elected mayor for 31 consecutive years. She was also the first woman to hold the position of prefect of the Roussillon RCM. As for Ms. Lise Poisson, after serving as a councillor for the city of Saint-Mathieu for 10 years, she went on to become its mayor for 2 decades. Both women represent public service at its finest, selfless, ever-present, consistent, legendary generosity, and unfailing honesty. Both have helped their towns grow into harmonious, Greece, and inclusive places. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of myself and all the people of La Prairie à Tétéken, I would like to thank Jocelyne and Lise for their dedication, vision, and service. Sainte Catherine and Saint-Mathieu owe them a great deal.
The Honourable Member for Elmwood Transcona.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister campaigned on the concerns of Canadians regarding the trade war with the United States. The Prime Minister even billed himself as a so-called master negotiator who would secure a deal with President Trump by July 21st of this year. When asked this past weekend about the progress of the trade negotiations, he replied, "Who cares?" Well, Mr. Speaker, I care, and the hardworking men and women of Elmwood Transcona care. We have seen tons of good-paying Canadian jobs flee to the United States following Trump's tariff threats. Is this Prime Minister prepared to look workers in the eye and tell them he does not care about their livelihoods? Canadians deserve a more urgent approach at the negotiating table, and I urge the Prime Minister to take these trade negotiations seriously and stand up for Canada. Conservatives, stand ready to deal with President Trump and take the trade war seriously, because we do care about Canadians.
The Honourable Member for New Westminster, Burnaby-Millerville.
Mr. Speaker, young people will build our future. We need them to. We don't have an option. Our country will be relying on them, so it's critical that they've got the support that they need. To the young Canadians, your voice matters and you are valued. I encourage you to be clear and organized about your priorities and become a leader in an area you're passionate about. Young generation brings a refreshing perspective to politics, and I'm happy that today we're joined by members of the Young Politicians of Canada who play an important role in shaping youth-centered policy around the world. The House of Commons represents all Canadians, and that means it needs to represent young people and the problems that they face, whether that's working towards home ownership, addressing climate change, supporting higher education, or navigating how AI will affect our world. These are concerns that are critical to address if we want to see our new generation thrive. Thank you.
Oral questions.
Here we go.
The Honourable Leader of the
Let's get it going.
Le Premier ministre.
The Prime Minister was elected on a platform where he said that American tariffs were an existential threat to Canada. But nonetheless, this weekend, journalists asked him if negotiations are continuing, and he said, "Who cares?" He said, "Who cares? I don't care." He doesn't seem to care about aluminum sector or forestry workers. Is that really the message he wants to send to Quebec workers, that he doesn't care? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, last week, the member for Prince George Peace River Northern Rockies took up MAGA accusations stating that immigrants slowed down the Canadian economy. I think Canadians deserve to know if the leader of the opposition approves of those comments. Mr. Speaker, my question was for the Prime Minister, who is here in Ottawa, who said yesterday, when asked about jobs for people in aluminum, steel, forestry, and many other sectors who are suffering because of the Prime Minister's failures and his broken promises. And he said, "Who cares?" how is it that the Prime Minister doesn't care about the fact that people are losing their jobs in Beauce, in the Saguenay, and elsewhere in Canada because of his failures? How is it that all he had to say was ask, who cares? The Honourable Government House Leader. Speaking of serious matters, Mr. Speaker.
In English. Last week, the member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies repeated MAGA claims that immigration and immigrants are a drag on the Canadian economy. I think Canadians want to know from the Leader of the Opposition.
Not from the top, but let's take a little pause and let the noise level drop a bit, and may the House Leader may continue.
So the member said, repeated MAGA claims that immigrants are a drag on our economy. I think Canadians want to know whether the Leader of the Opposition approves this kind of language, and will he sanction the member, yes or no?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister claimed during the last election that the U.S. tariffs were an existential crisis, and I quote, requiring that he immediately be elected to, quote, negotiate a win and get a deal by July 21st. Well, a few days ago, he was asked about the state of those negotiations, and he said there are no issues of importance to discuss. In fact, he said, who cares? Mr. Speaker, we care. We care about the workers who've lost their jobs and don't have paychecks to make their mortgage payments. Why doesn't he care?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Monsieur le Président, on trouve un peu que ça dérape.
Mr. Speaker, things are getting out of hand on the other side of the House.
Repeating of these mega claims came in the wake of the member for Calgary Midnapore questioning the Prime Minister's loyalty to Canada. I think we can all agree that those are comments that no Canadian can take seriously. My question is, does the Leader of the Opposition take them seriously? If he doesn't, which he must surely not, would he tell the House and would he tell his member to apologize for those comments?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister already apologized to President Trump.
Yes,
It was one of the many areas where he backed down and capitulated after claiming that he would be elbows up. He promised he'd have a deal by July 21st. No deal. Promised to negotiate a win. No wins. Mr. Speaker, he promised elbows up. Elbows are gone. And now, when he's asked about the state of the talks, he says, who cares? Why should he care? Days after he met with the president, Brookfield got an $80 billion contract with the White House. Is that really what he cares about? Does he not care about the hard-working Canadians that are counting on him to keep his promise?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Bien sûr que le Premier ministre se soucie.
Of course, the Prime Minister cares about the well-being of Canadians, our workers and industries. And that is why we are carrying out constructive negotiations with the U.S. But, Mr. Speaker, things are getting out of hand on the other side. The member for Calgary Midnapore, even this very morning, was questioning whether the Prime Minister is loyal to Canada. Can the Leader of the official opposition sanction her for her comments? Or does he agree?
Prime Minister, who said, who cares? When he was asked just over the weekend about the failure to keep his promises on trade since he took office. Not only has he failed to get the promised deal, but American tariffs on aluminum, autos, and steel have doubled. On forestry communities, they have tripled. The Prime Minister says, who cares? All of us on this side of the House care about the communities that are being emptied out in our forestry, the steel workers in Hamilton who don't have jobs to pay their mortgages. We care about those people. Why doesn't he?
The Honourable Minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade relations.
Mr. Speaker, just because the Leader of the Opposition keeps repeating the same line over and over again doesn't make it real. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition knows very well that our government was elected to defend Canadian workers and the Canadian economy. That's exactly what we did in a budget that was tabled in this House of Commons. The opposition decided not to support Canadian workers and provinces and territories and sectors under attack by unfair American tariffs. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to support Canadian workers and the Canadian economy and negotiate a deal with the United States.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
And negotiate a deal with the United States, he repeats the same promise that the Prime Minister has been breaking for the last 8 months. He said he would have a deal by July 21st, no deal. He said he'd negotiate a win, no win. He said he wouldn't back down. All he's done is back down. He said he'd be elbows up. His elbows are missing. And now when he's asked about the fate of these thousands of jobs that rely on him keeping his word, he says, who cares? Isn't it clear by now that even days after he met the president, only Brookfield got the $80 billion deal? Is that what he meant when he promised he'd negotiate a win?
Honorable Ministre des Finances.
Mr. Speaker, we care so much that...
On va recommencer là parce qu'on entend.
Let's start over. I can't hear anything. Let's just take a moment here. We'll let people calm down. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, it's only Monday. Look at how excited they are because they know there's good news in the budget, Mr. Speaker. That's what I see. Mr. Speaker, there's enough good news to go to Regina, to go to Winnipeg, to go to Moose Jaw, because you know what, Mr. Speaker? The people in Winnipeg understand you need to invest in infrastructure. The people in Moose Jaw understand you need to invest in our military. The people in Regina understand we need to invest in housing, Mr. Speaker. Canadians understand that we need to invest in this country. On this side of this house, we will always fight for Canadians because every day is a good day to fight for Canadians.
L'honorable député de Belleuil.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, I learned with shock that during his trip to the United Arab Emirates, the Prime Minister of Canada gave up on the idea that Canadian diplomacy and international relations are feminist. Will this government confirm today that gender equality is no longer a value promoted by Canada? Because I can state that gender equality is a Quebec value.
Secrétaire parlementaire à la ministre des Affaires étrangères.
L'engagement du Canada envers l'autonomisation des femmes et des filles, la réalisation de l'égalité des sexes, la condamnation de toutes les formes de discrimination et l'élimination de la violence sexiste est inébranlable. Cela ne changera jamais. Comme la ministre l'a souligné dans son discours.
Dû l'interprétation, est-ce que...
Apologies from the interpreter. The microphone was off. Interpretation will now resume. It's working now. Yes, it's working now. Let's start over from the beginning. Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear. Canada's commitment to women's and girls' empowerment, supporting gender equality, condemning all forms of discrimination, and eliminating sexist violence, our commitment to that is unshakable, and that will never change. As the Minister stated in her speech at the UN, Canada's foreign policy will be guided by three principles: defense and security, economic sovereignty, and our values. Speaking of values, feminism is a fundamental value of our government and is a key portion of our foreign policy. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly.
Ça sent le loup.
Well, I see that there is a lot of discomfort on the other side of the House. I can see that the team on the other side is having to work very hard to do something about the gaffe committed by the Prime Minister. The idea that we need to fight for a better world, the dramatic weight of the message of what he said on the international stage, is this not rather a matter of pleasing the sexist regime in the UAE? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, I just spoke about values. Feminism is a fundamental value of our government and a key portion of our foreign policy. As we continue to diversify our trade relationships, and as we continue to create opportunities for our workers, the Prime Minister has restated his commitment to fighting sexist violence and inequality, both within Canada and abroad. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, this is the art of speaking out of both sides of your mouth. We get the occasional remark about supporting feminist values, but actually, internationally, the message is that Canada no longer cares about gender equality. And as though by coincidence, that's at the very time when the Prime Minister is hoping to receive tens of billions of dollars from the United Arab Emirates. How can that be explained? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to be very, very clear. Canada's commitment to the empowerment of women and girls, the realization of gender equality, condemning all forms of discrimination and eliminating sexist violence is an unshakable commitment, and that will never change. As the Minister stated at the UN, and I mentioned this earlier, Canada's foreign policy will be guided by 3 principles, including values. And speaking of values, as I said, feminism is a key value of our foreign policy.
Honourable Member for Oxford.
The Prime Minister said he was a master negotiator and looked our auto workers in the eyes, promising a deal with the U.S. But now that he's failing, he's shrugging it off, saying, it doesn't matter. Who cares? And it's not a burning issue. Well, he's wrong, because it is a burning issue for Denise, an auto worker in Oxford who is losing her job, and thousands of others who don't know how they'll make ends meet. So why doesn't the Prime Minister care about the same jobs he promised he would protect?
Yeah, way to go. The Honourable Minister responsible for Canada-US trade.
Mr. Speaker, this government is actively involved with the sectors of the economy that are facing the most pressure from the unjustified 232 tariffs. This includes, obviously, auto workers. It includes workers in the steel and aluminum industries and the softwood lumber industry. Mr. Speaker, we've already taken steps to support those workers and those businesses. My colleagues should be excited that there's more good news coming in our government's effort to support those industries as we navigate through a trade circumstance that Canada didn't create, and we're not going to sign any deal like the Leader of the Opposition.
The Honourable Member for Oxford.
Actively doing absolutely nothing for our workers. The Prime Minister literally campaigned on getting a deal with the U.S., but now since he's failing, he's brushing it off. He says, who cares, Mr. Speaker? Well, the thousands of auto workers who are losing their jobs, they care. The tens of thousands of spin-off workers who won't be able to pay their bills, pay their mortgage, feed their families, they care. Canadians do care, Mr. Speaker. So how can the Prime Minister look these workers in the eyes and tell them that their livelihoods aren't a burning issue?
That's right.
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Family.
Mr. Speaker, it's pretty rich for the member opposite to say that he cares about people like Denise, workers who are benefiting from work sharing, Mr. Speaker, supporting the very auto employers that he speaks about, Mr. Speaker, to retain a skilled workforce. Guess what? They voted against Denise, Mr. Speaker. They voted against Canadians who are benefiting from the measures, not just in Budget 2025, but that we've put into place since this attack on our economy. And Mr. Speaker, let me be clear, we'll be with workers like Denise. These guys are voting against them every day.
The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister promised a U.S. trade deal by the 21st of July. He called himself a master negotiator. He failed. And now he says he doesn't have a burning issue to talk to the U.S. President. Meanwhile, Windsor auto workers, the Stellantis, Ford, and the small businesses that supply them have a real burning issue with layoffs, shifts being cut, and a Christmas full of worry. Will the Prime Minister look these workers in the eye and tell them their jobs and their kids' futures are not a burning issue for him?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the honourable member knows, this government, the Minister of Industry, and all of us on this side are fighting every day for those jobs in Windsor and across southwestern Ontario. I want to quote from the Mayor of St. Thomas, Joe Preston. This mayor can't stop smiling. Generations in the future can stay here, have a job that pays well enough to buy a home in St. Thomas and become part of a really vibrant community. That's thanks to new investments that are being made in the sector in St. Thomas and across southwestern Ontario.
The honourable member for Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are sick of waiting. Windsor has one of the highest unemployment rates in the country. Families are worried about bills, factories being idled, and a real trade war. Okay? But the Prime Minister himself said, who cares? And, well, Conservatives care. Windsorites care. So when will this Prime Minister treat Windsor workers like their jobs matter and take urgent action to protect their paychecks and their families? For once and...
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The urgent action comes from actually building the kinds of vehicles and the kinds of batteries and the kinds of equipment that Canadians increasingly are investing in. That's why we have the Gigafactory in southwestern Ontario. We have the Nexstar plant, which is manufacturing, as we speak, batteries for the very vibrant economy in this part of in this sector, and we look forward to the honourable member coming on board with that.
Hear, hear.
Honourable member for Caribou, Prince George.
The Prime Minister was asked when he last spoken with President Trump over the ongoing trade negotiations. He literally looked in the camera and said, "Who cares?"
Unbelievable.
It doesn't matter. Not a burning issue. Let me tell you, who cares? The over 3,000 forestry workers in Caribou, Prince George that are out of work. The communities that are being crushed by the softwood tariffs. Communities where jobs are disappearing and mills are closing. Families are paying the price for his failure. And the Prime Minister says, who cares? When will the Prime Minister start fighting for the workers he's abandoned?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, good news. We will be announcing additional supports for the forestry sector in the coming days. We've already announced $1.2 billion in supports for the industry. We're working hard. We're talking with the industry every day. I will be speaking with the leaders of the industry again tonight, and we will have a new set of supports by the end of the week, Mr. Speaker.
Excellent. Excellent. Member for Caribou, Prince George.
More supports. More supports. More supports. They don't want charity. They want their jobs.
Yeah.
Literally said he doesn't care and it doesn't matter. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Seriously. Over 30 mills have closed in the province of British Columbia. 14 in mine. You know who cares and who matters? Little Lucas, 10 years old in 100 Mile Elementary School, when he couldn't hold back the tears and was talking about his family that lost their jobs. Why doesn't the Prime Minister fly to my riding and tell his family, look them in the eyes and tell them they don't matter?
Exactly. The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, like Lucas, I lived in a forestry town. I know what it feels like. I know how important these workers are. That's why we've announced $1.2 billion in support. That's why we're meeting with the leaders of the industry today, and that's why we'll be announcing another set of supports for the industry later this week. We have a trade war, Mr. Speaker. He should wake up.
Who cares? The Honourable Member for Quebec-Mactaquac.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister once said he was a master negotiator who could secure a deal with President Trump by July. He failed and now shrugs it off, saying who cares, and that he doesn't have a burning issue to speak with the President about. Well, I can help him. New Brunswickers care because 93% of our exports go to the U.S. The longer this issue goes unresolved, the more uncertainty there is for New Brunswick's forestry workers. You tell that to the people who live in Florenceville, Bristol, or in Plaster Rock, or in Nakawik. They certainly do care, and they want a government that responds. When will the Prime Minister secure a resolution and meet with our closest neighbor?
The Honourable Minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade.
Mr. Speaker, it might be useful to remind our colleague from New Brunswick that this government had been engaged in constructive and extensive negotiations with the American administration, and we were pursuing a deal that we believed would be in the interests of Canadian workers and the Canadian economy and the Americans as well. Mr. Speaker, President Trump decided to suspend those negotiations, and while he did that, Mr. Speaker, is my colleague suggesting that the government do nothing to support those very workers he talked about? Good news. We're not going to do that. We're going to support those workers and stand up for those industries.
L'honorable député de Montcalm.
The honourable member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about Brookfield, the Prime Minister's company that he still holds shares of within a blind trust. The ethics commissioner created an ethics screen for the Prime Minister, which is managed by one of his advisors, Michael Sabia, who also held Brookfield shares but sold them to protect his Prime Minister. So if Mr. Sabia could sell his shares to protect the Prime Minister from any hint of a conflict of interest, why can't the Prime Minister do the same? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, as my colleague knows very well, parliamentarians and upper officials have some of the strictest ethics rules in the world. The Prime Minister has always met all the rules, as we all have, and will continue to do so. The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, the highest position of government requires the highest level of transparency. As long as the Prime Minister is both a shareholder and a decision-maker, there will be concerns. For example, in October 2024, the Prime Minister contributed to moving the headquarters of Brookfield from Toronto to New York, and 7 months later at the G7, he announced that companies headquartered in the U.S. would no longer have to pay the global minimum 15% tax to fight tax avoidance. How much money did the Prime Minister let Brookfield save, money which didn't end up being gathered for the public coffers? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has been following one of the strictest ethics codes in the world, so he's not doing anything for Brookfield by definition. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. We should remember that during the campaign, the Prime Minister said he was a great negotiator who was going to get rid of the tariffs before July 21st. But now it's the 24th of November, and the negotiations are completely stuck. And then, when asked if there were more negotiations, he said, who cares? He said that there were no urgent issues. But aluminum sector workers do care. Can the Prime Minister look at them straight in the eyes and tell them that their job doesn't matter and no one cares about it? The Honourable Minister responsible for Canada-US trade. Mr. Speaker, once again, my colleague knows very well that our government cares deeply about taking all necessary measures to protect the aluminum industry, aluminum workers, and other sectors that we named a few moments ago. As he knows, President Trump decided to suspend negotiations, even though, from our perspective, these negotiations would have allowed us to reach an agreement that would have been in the interests of these workers. So as long as the U.S. refuses to negotiate, we will be there to protect those industries. The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, since the arrival of this Prime Minister, not only have aluminum tariffs remained in place, but in fact they've doubled. Quebec produces 90% of Canadian aluminum. And in my region, in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, 30,000 direct and indirect jobs depend on that sector. Those workers need these paychecks to house and feed themselves. How is it that the Prime Minister says that he doesn't care?
To the Minister of Industry.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my colleague knows very well, we have been fighting these tariffs with our Strategic Response Fund. We also have our Canadian procurement strategy in order to support these sectors and use their products in national interest projects. And we hope that on the other side of the House, they will support us.
The honourable member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
When the Prime Minister was asked this weekend whether he had spoken to Trump about trade, his response was, "Who cares? And it's not a burning issue." Well, I can tell you who does care. Conservatives care, and so do the thousands of Hamilton steelworkers and manufacturing workers that go to bed every night wondering if they'll have a job in the morning. How can the Prime Minister look at Hamilton steelworkers in the eye and tell them that their job security isn't a burning issue?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Well, I think, Mr. Speaker, the steelworkers would be pretty disappointed if they knew that that Conservative member of Parliament keeps fighting against the very measures that this government is putting in place to save our steel sector, Mr. Speaker. I was at Algoma Steel just a few months ago working with that company and its workers to make sure they have the liquidity so that they can find new markets, protect those jobs, ensure their workers are trained and attached to the workforce. These are concepts these Conservatives can't even understand, Mr. Speaker, because they keep voting against the very people that sent them here.
The honourable member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Mr. Speaker, that is a 30-second admission of guilt and failure on this government. A response of who cares is a terrible attempt to downplay the important trade deal, how important a trade deal is for Canadian steel and manufacturing. The steel workers of Hamilton want an answer. They want a deal where they give them job security, pay their bills, and feed their families. A deal that was promised to them July 21st. So on behalf of the Canadian steel and manufacturing workers, when will the Prime Minister deliver on his promise and get a deal done?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I've met with workers from Ingersoll, forestry workers in BC, and I've met with steel workers in that member's riding. Our message is consistent. We'll be there for workers. We'll be there for their families. My question for the member is, why did he vote against the budget? The budget provides supports for all of these industries, but they like to come in here, perform for the camera, Mr. Speaker, but we're doing the work. We're going to defend our country.
Honourable member for Regina Luban.
These Liberals think Canadians should be satisfied with begging for scraps from their table. This Prime Minister said he'd be a master negotiator. He said he'd get a deal done with Trump by July 21st. He failed. Now he says, who cares? There is no burning issue. Well, Conservatives care, and so do the members of USW 5890. They're the hardworking men at Interpro Steel in Regina, and they care about their jobs. So how can this Prime Minister look them in the eye and say their jobs that feed their family aren't a burning issue?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry.
We're going to defend our workers by having a $5 billion strategic response fund.
That's right.
That party voted against that.
That's
We're
right.
going to defend our workers by having a Buy Canadian policy, the most ambitious Buy Canadian policy on record. This party opposed that. We're always going to be there for our workers. The question is that party going to be on their side?
The Honourable Member for Sudbury.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians support our efforts to diversify Canadian trade. That's why our government is on a mission to double non-U.S. exports over the next decade and to unleash $1 trillion in new investments in Canada. Because every door that the Prime Minister opens means more opportunities for the businesses in my riding to reach new markets, grow their business, and create jobs in Sudbury. Can the Minister of International Trade update Canadians on the landmark investments delivered by the Prime Minister and why leadership on the world stage matters?
Great question. Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Her important question and her tireless work. What began in 2014, the Canada-UAE investment agreement, this government finished in just months, leading to our Prime Minister securing the single largest investment commitment of $70 billion, Mr. Speaker. We are now elevating our relationship by negotiating a trade deal that cut tariffs, remove red tape, and boost Canadian exports to the UAE. We are building new international relationships to grow trade, attract investments, to build the fastest growing economy in the G7. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Fort McMurray Cold Lake.
Every dollar the Prime Minister spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians, driving up the cost of everything. Food inflation on baby formula is up 84% in 8 years. Formula is one of the top stolen food products in Canada, and it is now kept under lock and key in many places in Canada. I heard from Sierra, a Manitoba mom, who knew she was buying stolen baby formula, but she did it anyways because she had no other choice. Does the Prime Minister care that parents can't afford to buy baby formula?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Children and Youth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we are taking action to fight food insecurity. This is why, among other measures, we're making the National School Food Program permanent to ensure more children have access to healthy meals at school. This also represents over $800 in savings for families on their grocery bills. We introduced a middle-class tax cut. We've introduced dental care. We have early learning and child care arrangements with provinces across the country, bringing costs down by thousands of dollars. We are there for families. I'd encourage the members opposite to support these measures as well.
The Honourable Member for Fort McMurray Cold Lake.
Babies don't go to school. What's their problems? They don't even listen. This is about baby formula, not school food. The Liberal programs aren't working and they're making it worse. Families are switching to cow milk and solids earlier than doctors recommend because they have no other choice. They can't afford baby formula, and they don't want their children to starve under these Liberal policies. Does the Prime Minister care that families are making tough choices because they refuse to act?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, this government is investing in children and infants, children of all ages. Not only did we create the Canada Child Benefit, families received it last week. We also committed to $10 a day childcare spaces across the country. Parents in my riding are saving over $10,000 a year for their kids. But don't take my word for it. Let me tell you about what a parent said at Andrew Fleck Children's Services. They said, we've been able to have healthier meals at homes and start saving for post-secondary education with early learning and childcare. Without this extra funding, it would have been impossible to survive and live in our current house. That's the difference that
The Honourable Member for Cambridge.
The Liberal government is the costliest in Canadian history, and hardworking families are paying the price. In my community, people tell me they're working hard and saving up, but they're still walking out of the grocery store with half a cart for twice the price. Demand at the Cambridge Food Bank is up 114%, and 1,000 new families are turning to it for the first time. The culprit is simple. It's the Liberal industrial carbon tax on farmers and fertilizer that gets baked into every loaf of bread and every slice of meat on the shelves. Why is the Prime Minister insisting on not only keeping the industrial carbon tax, but raising it when Canadians already can't afford to feed their kids?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
We're back with the imaginary taxes again, Mr. Speaker. We're back with the imaginary taxes. There is no tax on food. Farms are largely, if not totally, exempt from the industrial carbon tax. Even their favorite Twitter guy, the food professor, says that there is no incidence on food prices from the matters that the member mentions. I would invite her to correct herself. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Cambridge.
Mr. Speaker, the best program is a good-paying job with low inflation. Yet after 10 years of this Liberal government, Canadians have neither. The same government that created this mess now wants applause for pretending to fix it. But more government and more taxes only mean more inflation for Canadians. Food prices have climbed nearly 40% faster here in the U.S. and faster than wages can keep up. 4 out of 5 Canadians say food is their biggest budget stress, and 30% are now forced to choose between heating their homes or feeding their families. This Prime Minister refuses to listen and keeps hiking inflationary taxes that send people to the food bank. Why is the Prime Minister forcing Canadians to choose between going cold or going hungry?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps a better question is why the Conservatives keep on pointing to imaginary taxes as they go forward. Let's be clear. There is no food packaging tax. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. There is no food packaging tax. Beyond that, the industrial carbon price does not add to the cost of food. This has been done. Study after study proves that point. But if they want to support Canadians, I hope that they will support the programs we put forward, and I hope that they will fight climate change, because that is actually one of the major causes for the increased cost of food.
All right.
The honourable member for Terra Nova, the Peninsula.
Every dollar this Prime Minister spends is either tax into the pockets of Canadians or from printed and borrowed money, driving up inflation and driving up the cost of everything in Canada. In PEI, the University Food Bank usage is up 60%, and it's the same old story right across Atlantic Canada. Yet this Prime Minister is refusing to scrap his high, costly regulations that only makes it more expensive to fish, farm, and ship our food. Why is this Prime Minister increasing the industrial carbon tax, increasing the fuel tax, and making it even more expensive for Canadians?
Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Speaker, I was in my riding last weekend, and I spent time at a school in the riding. I served food.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
From the top, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. I was in my riding last weekend, served food in a school, in my riding. The educators, the administrators all spoke about how important that program is to the 400 children in that school. I also want to remind the member opposite that I had many meetings in the riding with constituents, with progressive conservative business owners who are thanking me for the budget that is investing in this country, that is building this country. We have solutions. I will not play this political rhetoric.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
This Prime Minister's costly credit card budget piles inflationary spending and debt onto our children and our grandchildren. Canadians are putting nearly 50% more on credit cards for basic living expenses than just 10 years ago. And now Fitch Ratings warns the government has blown past its own fiscal anchors and says finances, quote, run a high risk of further deterioration. How many more red warning lights need to start flashing before the Prime Minister stops treating taxpayers like a limitless credit card?
The Honourable Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, the only word the opposition seems to know is no. It's time for them to take yes for an answer. We said yes to investing in our businesses and entrepreneurs. They said no. We said yes to a national food program. They said no. We said yes to affordable homes, investing in our military. They said no. Mr. Speaker, it's time for them to say yes to Canada and build this country strong.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Is sounding the warning. Yes, Canadians are drowning in credit card bills after a decade of Liberal inflation. And yes, the Parliamentary Budget Officer says the Liberals have abandoned their own debt-to-GDP anchor, the very same anchor they say protects their AAA rating. The PBO further concludes that the Liberals have almost no chance of achieving their declining deficit-to-GDP ratio. It's no wonder the costly Prime Minister wants to fire the PBO. How many more fiscal watchdog reports have to come out for the Prime Minister to rein his inflationary spending?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are not buying what that Conservative leader and his party are selling. In fact, 70% of Canadians have no confidence in him to lead. Last week, we passed an historic budget by Canadians, for Canadians, so we will never be reliant on one country again. It's time for that member to put down the talking points, get on board with us, and let's build Canada. Thank you.
The honourable member for Calgary-Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, this credit card budget loads today's spending onto tomorrow's taxpayers. Fitch Credit Rating, which rates the government's credit, says the Liberal government frequently blows through its fiscal anchors and has, quote, a high risk of further deterioration. The Parliamentary Budget Officer says the government abandoned its previous fiscal anchor and that was there to preserve its AAA rating. So how many more disastrous independent reports is it going to take for this Prime Minister to rein in his spending?
Good question. L'Honorable Ministre des Finances.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
We'll take nonsense from these guys. But Kevin Page, Mr.
Mr. Speaker, a former parliamentary budget officer will give them some lessons. And I quote, "We need to focus on growth. We need capital investment to boost innovation, improve infrastructure, diversify trade. We live in a dangerous time and we must meet our NATO spending." I believe Parliament should approve the budget plan, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we will fight for Canadians because every day is a good day to fight for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Poilievre. Mr. Speaker, the $78 billion deficit is dangerous. The Liberals have maxed out Canadians' credit cards. Experts, including Fitch Ratings, which rates the government's creditworthiness, are warning us. Caution! There is a high risk of worsening the financial crisis in Canada. Even the Parliamentary Budget Officer, an impartial officer of the House of Commons, pointed out that this government is putting Canada's AAA credit rating at risk. Can someone get this Prime Minister to come to his senses and to stop spending? The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We have the best fiscal situation of all G7 countries. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio of all G7 countries. We have a AAA credit rating. Mr. Speaker, economists in this House are on this side of the House, and that's no coincidence. And I'm sure that deep within himself, the member for Poilievre was happy to see his colleagues hide behind the curtains so that the budget would pass, because it's a great budget. The Honourable Member for Poilievre. Mr. Speaker, our government has an ambitious budget with transformational investments in our transportation system. The Minister of Transport visited my riding in Quebec City to talk about these initiatives, especially at the port and the airport. But before that, the Minister visited the Magdalen Islands. Could the Minister provide more details on the important announcement he made there and what it means for the community? Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, indeed, I had a great time visiting there, announcing many transport investments all over Quebec thanks to our budget. There are some great projects in Quebec, including expanding the runway on the Magdalen Islands. I was very happy to go to the Magdalen Islands and share that great news with them, and I thank them for their warm welcome, the people of the Magdalen Islands. But guess what, Mr. Speaker? The Bloc Québécois and the Conservatives voted against these projects, like expanding the Saguenay Port and the runway in the Magdalen Islands.
Justin Trudeau killed a pipeline in 2016 and backed a West Coast shipping ban. They now want credit for reversing their own damage. Reality finally caught up, and Canadians don't know which Prime Minister they might get. One day he's a climate crusader who rode himself into green stardom, and now he's scrambling to review the very projects he spent a decade sabotaging. Will this government admit that their keep-it-in-the-ground crusade strangled our economy, weakened our sovereignty, and left workers with the bill, or will he keep pretending that it wasn't all self-inflicted as they dance around a pipeline announcement? Yeah!
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I know the member opposite is nostalgic for the previous government, but that's not who's working right now. Canada will be a leading global energy superpower in both clean and conventional energy. We did not ask for this trade war, but we will win it. We got elected to build strong nation-building projects. We got elected to grow our economy. We got elected to reinforce Canadian autonomy and independence. We will do that in conjunction with Indigenous peoples and environmentally responsibly.
Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Alberta is expecting an east-west pipeline. The media is also reporting on the announcement of an east-west pipeline, and the only ones who haven't said it are the ones who are directly responsible for it. They can't even utter the word pipeline. So I've got a simple question. Is the government in favor of an east-west pipeline, yes or no?
Yeah! The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, this government will look at any project, including a pipeline brought forward by a proponent. We have a process under C5 to look at it. When a pipeline comes forward, if the government of Alberta wants to bring it forward, we will look at it then.
Member for Dufferin-Caledon.
No matter how hard the days get for average Canadians, like the 2.2 million Canadians that go to a food bank every day, it's always a good day for Brookfield. And the latest good news for Brookfield is a $500 million contract with the European Space Agency, which is housed by property owned 50% by Brookfield. Why is it the priority of this government to line the pockets of the Prime Minister's former company with a $500 million contract when there's 2.2 million Canadians lining up at food banks because they can't afford to feed themselves and a 6.9% unemployment rate? Why?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry.
On this day when we have Jeremy Hansen, the Canadian astronaut, here with us, I'd like to quote from another astronaut, Marc Garneau. The best way for Canada to work with other countries, as we had with NASA since the 1960s. That's why Canada signed an agreement with the European Space Agency in the 1970s, as well as several bilateral agreements with other countries allowed us to fly Canadian hardware on their spacecraft in return for sharing the scientific results. Maintaining those relationships will continue to be important. This is what we do when we build Canada strong.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Mr. Speaker, Canada shows its strength when we act decisively and seize the world's opportunities. That matters for businesses in my riding of Rivière-des-Mille-Îles, but also for businesses all over Canada which want to grow and expand. It is clear that we are working to access new markets and get huge investments. Can the minister share with Canadians the tangible investment that came from the Prime Minister's leadership?
No.
The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, it's great to receive such a great question because the opposition doesn't seem to celebrate the successes in our economy. Meanwhile, our Prime Minister has announced $70 billion of investment in Canada. $70 billion of investment in our economy. And that's all thanks to our workers, their know-how, their experience. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we will always work to create a strong Canada and a strong Canadian economy. Let's all celebrate Canada together, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable-Lotbinière. To this Liberal Prime Minister, once a friend, always a friend. He's very attached, this Prime Minister, to his European and Brookfield roots. Meanwhile, Canadians have to take on debt to buy groceries. But what does the Prime Minister do? He gives $500 million to the European Space Agency to create jobs in Europe at the Harwell Science and Innovation Campus. And can you guess who owns 50% of the campus? You guessed it, Brookfield. Is this yet another coincidence, or is it more flim-flammery to make the Prime Minister's friends even richer? How can the Prime Minister let 600,000 Quebecers line up at food banks while he sends their money and their jobs to his friends in Europe?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a good time for space in Canada. There is even an astronaut among us today. We have a joint investment with Europeans, and that investment will grow the Canadian economy. Each dollar contributed by the European Space Agency generates $3 in sales. Also, on December 11th, members should join us so that our businesses can benefit from that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians do want to diversify trade, but we want to diversify trade with democracies that share our values, that respect human rights. Now we're cozying up to the People's Republic of China. I haven't heard they're starting to treat the Uyghurs well. I don't understand how we can want to do deals with countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates that right now has been caught with personnel carriers carrying out war crimes in Sudan. Do we trade away our values? Do we trade away our souls when we trade with those countries?
The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, respect for human rights, labour and the environment remain at the heart of our trade policies and our high-standard trade agreements. Canada is deliberate and mindful when negotiating trade agreements, and we prioritize Canadian values. Building new trading partners around the world is an important driver to promote Canadian values, create jobs, and encourage economic growth that works for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Je voudrais signaler aux députés.
I would like to note the presence of the winners of the 2025 Impact Prizes.
God. All right, gang. We're going to wrap up right there. I've got stuff to do like in 15 minutes. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I had a great time. This chat room, I'm not lying, cracks me up. What a great group. Like, I look forward to this every day because it gives me a chuckle watching this gong show, bunch of goofs. Sorry, I've got little ice drink there. Anyhow, I've got to run. Thank you all so much for watching. Smash the subscribe. Come back and join us tomorrow. Hit the like. It helps so much. Rhonda, Kirk, thank you so much. That is it. What a gong show. Cryptomary is slipping in late. What's up, sister? Anyhow, gang, I got to run. We will go out on this. So, thanks a lot for tuning in, guys. We'll catch you same time, same place tomorrow. What a gong show. It's only going to heat up.
Fisherman who will tell us about his very enjoyable hobby. Now, I would like to see you all through our magic mirror. Romper, bumper, stomper, boo. Tell me, do. Magic mirror, please tell me today, did all of my friends have fun at play? I see all of my friends in Alberta. It's nice to see you. And I see Dan and Vivian. I see Marlon and Mona. I see Catherine and Harley. I see Anne and Elizabeth and Jane. I see Bert and Nicole. And I see you too. I hope to see you tomorrow, right here in Romper Room.
Ding dong, knock, knock, hey, daddy, do. Bing bong, tick tock, bebop, boom.
Kick off your weekend with exciting CFL action when the Edmonton Eskimos tackle the BC Lions in Vancouver. Tomorrow night at 10:30 on CFTO TV.
Ding dong, knock, knock, hey, daddy, do. Tip tap, pitter pat, granny cat too. Rooty toot, kimble, loopy loo. Boppity stompity, romper room and friends.
That's it, gang. We're out. We'll catch you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Thank you for watching here. That's all I can say. We'll catch you in the next one.